Hi folks, I'm Nicole Gilbert, and this is the Stop Scrolling, Start Sewing podcast. Each Wednesday, join me as I share the ins and outs of that quilt life. If you don't have a sewing machine, or you can bust out a Superfly Y seam, this is the podcast for you. Hey folks, Nicole here. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 3, and I am just so excited to be rolling on along this season with all of you. So for those of you who are longtime listeners of the podcast, I have a new format this year where you can find me both on your favorite podcast provider, but also on YouTube. I thought this was a great addition to the podcast because I have gotten a lot of questions over the years asking, can you show me the product? Can you send me a link so I can see exactly what you were talking about? And so this way, I'm still super portable. You can listen to me on your commute to work, while you're on the treadmill, wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. But if you're more of a visual person and you want to see what I'm talking about, you can head on over to the YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel is Nicole Gilbert Quilts. And so if you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, go ahead and hit subscribe, either on your favorite podcast provider or on YouTube, or better yet, on both. Okay, folks, so this week, and I'm very excited about this. So last season, I did an episode on quilt retreats, how to find one, what you can expect for one. And it has been one of the most listened to episodes on the podcast for good reason. When you're going to a quilt retreat, especially if it's your first one, you're like searching out there for all of the information. What can you expect? What's going to go on? And so I thought this week, what we would talk about is packing for a quilt retreat, and really packing for any kind of portable sewing. So I'm going to refer to both sew-in days. I know that my quilt retreat when we were in New York had, not once a month necessarily, but maybe every other meeting would be a sew-in, meaning that we would have the meeting space all day. We would bring our machines. We would still have our meeting. We'd go through all of the basic quilting guild meeting things, show and tell, notes from our treasurer, potentially a program. But then we would just separate up and we would sew. And it was just a great time to sew with, your sewing comrades. And sometimes we would have a specific project that we were all working on together, like a quilt for Ukraine or cosmetic bags for a local women's shelter. The sky's the limit, but that's a sew-in. A quilt retreat, which is so much fun, and if you haven't done one, really you should look into it. A quilt retreat is going to be, 2 or more days. You're sleeping overnight, you're quilting from sun up to sundown and usually way beyond it, and it is just a blast. But these things do offer some, for lack of a better word, hurdles that you're going to have to jump across. And that's because you need to bring your machines. Very few retreats that I've seen supply machines, which is very different than taking a class at your local shop, because a lot of times the classrooms have machines, so you don't necessarily need to bring yours with you. In fact, if you're shopping for a new sewing machine, taking a class is a great way to try a different brand of machine and really try it. Not just sew a couple stitches on some scrap fabric, but really do a project on it and see if you like it. So that's a little tip from me to you. But let's get back to sewing retreats. So one thing that I would say is that you really want to make sure that you are as well prepared as you possibly can be. Some retreats are going to be hosted by a shop or sponsored by a shop, in which case you have either very easy access to the shop, think a retreat center that's attached to a quilting store, which oh, praise the hallelujah, you can buy whatever you forget. And some have it sponsored, meaning that, like a member of your guild owns a quilt shop. And so they bring a selection from your shop, like the most used notions, some thread, some batting, things like that, so that you could buy it on the go. But some retreats are totally remote. And I say that because you've got, like I'm thinking about, I went on a retreat with the Hudson Valley Modern Quilt Guild last fall, and it was at this beautiful little inn, the Interlaken Inn, shout out. It was lovely, but the closest quilt shop was like a drive away. So if anybody wanted to go and get something, you kind of had to block out a little portion of your afternoon. And if you only have 2 or 3 days to sew all day, taking 2 or 3 hours out of the afternoon actually could be kind of a hindrance to your overall sewing experience. So you really want to make sure that you're as prepared as possible. Now, if your retreat is like a week long and there's like phenomenal quilt shops in the area, by all means, take a day and shop, because like who else is going to love quilt shop shopping as much as you besides the people who are at the retreat with you? So something to keep in mind. So I'm rambling a little bit. Let's get into what we need to bring. So obviously the first thing, like I said, sewing machine. How are you going to get your sewing machine there, and what should you keep in mind? Now, if it's a sew in, it's just like a during the day, go in there, whatever. I suggest taking just a small portable machine. Baby lock, like any of the machines in the Genuine collection would be great to take. Even I take my Accomplish, which is a straight stitch machine. Super powerful. It's a workhorse. It's amazing. You should really look into it if you are interested in straight stitch machines. But something a little bit more easily portable is what I suggest taking. And you can carry those in a number of different ways. And so, you'll see me kind of step off for a little bit here if you're watching on YouTube, just because I'm going to be picking stuff up. The first option would be a bag like this, and it's a little heavy because my Accomplish is actually in this. Okay. So you can buy a bag like this, which is just a structured sewing machine bag that's on wheels, and it's got a pull handle, kind of like a rolly suitcase. You can get these at most major retailers. I've seen them at Walmart, at Joann's, at Hobby Lobby. You can get them at quilt shops. Now, they're not all created equal, and I will say this bag, I don't really use that much anymore, mostly because this was a gift from my lovely husband very early on in my sewing career, and it's not necessarily, the wheels aren't the best quality. They're very small. They're very small wheels, which means that it can kind of tip on you a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind, like what is the wheel structure, especially because now I put a much heavier sewing machine in it. So not my favorite machine, favorite bag, but there is a brand out there who makes the same style of bag. And I'm sure if you're listening on the podcast, you can kind of envision what I'm talking about, because they are pretty commonplace, these bags. But it's called Tutto. It's Tutto. And they make phenomenal bags. And they're this type of bag, but the structure of them is phenomenal. They've got wonderful steel frames. You can get them in a variety of sizes, so you can get them big enough even to carry your main super big machines. Like a Tutto extra large will fit a chorus or a ballad or a Solaris. So like super big machines, which is great. But you can also get like small ones that are gonna fit, a Zeal, a Zest, a Soprano, a Lyric. Like there's sizes for everything. So that is one option, and it's a great option. The wheels are clutch because when you are doing trips in and out from your car to either the conference room, the sewing center, your hotel room, dumping a bunch of stuff there and then deciding what stays in your hotel room and what goes to the sewing center. Like, these are all things that you want to keep in mind. So the easier way that you can move your sewing machine, the better. Your sewing machine is the heaviest thing that you're probably going to be taking. So this is one option, a sewing bag such as this. Another option, which is actually what I do most of the time now, is this. And this is the ultimate travel bag. Let me move this iron out of the way. This is the ultimate travel bag, and I actually personally made this. You can make your own by following the By Annie pattern, and I have a link of this in the show notes or in the video description below, so you can totally see what the pattern is. It is not super difficult, super impressive. I've never had someone see my ultimate travel bag and not like die over it, and that's not being me being full of myself. Like, legit, these are really cool bags, and every time I see somebody else's, I'm like, oh my god, it's amazing, because they are. They're just amazing. But this also fits my accomplish. Now, it's got handles, it's got a crossbody strap with a nice shoulder pad, but the coolest part about this bag is this strap right here, which, see how my hand goes straight through? It's actually a strap that's sewn across the back, and its purpose is so that you can slide it over the pulley handlebars of a rolly bag. So this is great for if you're going overnight. This is my carry-on. I've got my rolly bag. It's on top. It doesn't fall off. It's wonderful. Secret option C, though, this fits my accomplish. So I put my sewing machine in there, and then I got this, which this I think is Samsonite brand. I think it was only like $20. It's a rolly cart, kind of like the infrastructure of it. So it is a base with the pulley bar, and it's got securing straps. So what I do is I actually put that strap where I would use it normally to just sit the ultimate travel bag on top of a rolly suitcase. I actually put this and I put it over the pulley bar. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm actually doing this right now. I put it over the pulley bar, and now I've made my ultimate travel bag into a rolly suitcase. Okay? And what I love about that is, one, I'm going to a quilt retreat and I'm showing my fabulous bag that I made myself, which is always a good time. But this cart, because I got it from, like, you know, Toomey makes them, Samsonite makes them, London Fog makes them. So you can get like a high quality one of these. This is an amazing steel structure. Like, this is heavy duty. The wheels are huge. They're the gel rollerblade wheels, so they're super smooth to use. And it folds up super compact when you're not using it, which I love. So that is another option, and this is usually the route that I take. It's a little bit more, even though the bag itself, this is a flimsier duffel, the frame and handlebar is so much more sturdy than my sewing machine bag. Not necessarily true, though, if you go with those Tuttos. They will be just as strong as this option. So that's getting your sewing machine there. Now, what about cutting? Okay. So first and foremost, I like when I go to a retreat to complete an entire project. So like this quilt on the wall, and this is the reason why this quilt is on the wall, is I actually completed this quilt at a retreat last year, the Hudson Valley Modern Quilt Guild's Interlaken Inn retreat that I mentioned earlier. This is a Lottie, and the pattern design was designed by Penelope Handmade. I pieced it, I long armed it. But I did this entire quilt, like the entire quilt at that retreat. And in order to do that, I cut out every single piece, labeled it, and put them in individual sandwich bags and gallon Ziplocs, completely labeled, so that when I got to the retreat, I was ready to sit down and sew. That's crucial. For those of you who are quilters who have been doing it for a while, you know sometimes the cutting of a quilt can take 1 or 2 days to just do the cutting, okay? If we waited to cut and do all of this cutting until we got to our retreat, we would have very little time to sew. So I definitely suggest having everything cut out before you go. That being said, obviously throughout the process, you're going to need to do more cutting or trimming. You know, this block is like a gajillion half square triangles. That's how this whole thing is put together. It's half square triangles. And so I had to do trimming, a ton of trimming to make sure that my half square triangles were perfect. And so what do I do then? If I'm going to a sew-in, meaning just for the afternoon, I bring this OmniGrid little booklet. I want to say it's like 8.5 by 11 inches. And again, links in the descriptions. But when you open this up, it's fantastic because it has a cutting mat. It also has a pressing mat. So this is wonderful. It's tiny, it's lightweight, it's easy to set up because like literally I'm set up, which is kind of awesome. And it's big enough that you can do trimming. Now, this is not big enough to do major cutting, but if you're going to a sew-in and you're only going to be sewing for a few hours in an afternoon, you're not going to do major cutting. You're going to make sure that you're setting yourself up to be able to sew and enjoy your time there. And it's just not going to be comfortable to do that at a sew-in. But this is great for trimming half square triangles, small cuts, things like that. Okay? So that's one thing. Now, going to a retreat, and I keep mentioning this one retreat, and it's just because it's the most recent one I went to. When going to a retreat, I bring my full-size 24 by 36 inch cutting mat. My favorite cutting mats right now are Riley Blake cutting mats. They come in beautiful colors. I love the feel of how my rotary blade glides along them, and I think that they're just beautiful. And they've got wonderful clear markings on them. Let's see, which one is this one? This one, I don't even know which one this one is. My last one that was like a reddish color on one side and light blue on the other, that one was a Lori Holt. This one's not a Lori Holt. I forget which one this is, so I apologize about that. But also like Chris Thomas has one from Riley Blake that's like white, which is just like, come on, a white cutting mat. It's beautiful. So just throwing that out there for the cutting mats. Again, I will include links to all of these products in the description. Now, rulers. So it's like a whole thing. I love these, which I don't know if you can see it. Let's see if I put something behind it. No, that made it worse. So this is a 6-inch square with, well, it's 6.5 inch because it includes the seam allowances. But it's like the perfect ruler because it's got our 45-degree angles on it, which means you can trim half square triangles, you can trim flying geese, you can square up a 6.5 inch block, and you can do a lot of trimming and cutting. So this guy I take with me to sew-ins always. Really, I take this guy everywhere with me because it's really that impressive. I also have another one that's 9 inches, and I will often also take that one. They're a little bit, they're more compact than taking, you know, my 6 by 24. I still get all the markings that I need out of it. And those two sizes, the 6.5 and the 9.5, really do cover me for any cutting or trimming I'm doing at a sew-in. If I'm going to a full-on retreat, I will take my 6.5 by 24.5 inch ruler. Now, I have suggested for years always to get the best products that you possibly can within your budget, and rulers are no exception. I, for years, used a Fiskars ruler, and it did me very, very well. What I ended up doing, because they don't have the grips on them, is I ended up using True Grips, which are like these little stickers that you could put on the back of your rulers to make sure that they don't slip. And then one day my husband was like, bro, just go out and get a ruler that's got non-slips on them, because I'm sick and tired of seeing you replace those True Grips thing. And I was like, okay, fine. And that's when I found and fell in love with Creative Grids rulers. You can kind of see here these like patches. They're like these circles, and they're like rough. They're not like so rough that they're going to catch on your fabric, but they're rough enough that it keeps the ruler from slipping. Like, look, I'm putting it on my table right now and I'm pushing on it and it's not moving, which is pretty nice and helps with your sewing accuracy, your cutting accuracy, especially if you're one of those people who find that once you move your hand on your ruler starts to do a little wiggly dance on you. This one is a great ruler. But I have 6.5 by 24 inch. I also have an 8.5 by 18.5, which is just another phenomenal. But I usually only bring one or the other to a retreat, because it's a little, they're ungainly. They're big. But they're awesome. It's one of those things you gotta trade off comfort or ease of use. And when it comes to a 2, 3, or 4 day retreat, ease of use wins every time. And then, of course, I always bring my cutting tools. Rotary cutter. This one is the Olfa Splash. Love it. It's super cute. I also have taken to, and I don't know if you can see this. Let me get nice and close. Do you see I wrote fabric only on it with my Cricut, because my Cricut's my best friend. Because I also have other rotary cutters, and so I'll use those for like mixed media or doing Cricut kind of things. I'm a crafty mama. That's what I do. So this is my preferred rotary cutter. I don't like all those fancy rotary cutters with the fancy handles and the buttons and all of that stuff. I like a plain stick rotary cutter. That's just me. And then also for cutting, I bring fabric shears. These are my fun special edition Tula Pink ones, which I'm like obsessed with. And they finally came in the mail. There was like a whole thing with the gold plating, but they finally came and I'm so excited. They're so heavy. They're delightful. And then also fabric snips. And I have no idea what brand these are. I got them at my local quilt shop. They were like in the little tray next to the checkout machine. And they're amazing. And they were like $3. They're like the best things ever. If anybody knows the brand of these, holler at me, because I would love to share it with you guys. Because this is one of those things where it's like, you don't need to spend $1 jillion to get a fabulous quality tool. This is one of those things. Okay. So that's cutting. Now, another thing that you might be thinking about is pressing. Now, one, I always use, and this is the iron I use always. Whether I'm at home, whether I'm traveling, this is the iron I use always. I love it. It is the Aliso Mini Project Iron. You can kind of get them everywhere, really sells them. They're a super, super popular iron. What I love about it is that it does not have automatic shut off, which I know for some people are like, I need the automatic shut off because like I forget and I space out. My problem is I don't like the automatic shut off because when I sew, you know, so I am sewing for hours at a time, and there's nothing more frustrating than chain piecing, and then going to your iron and your iron is stone cold because it automatically shut itself off because you're the kind of person who is sitting in front of your sewing machine for 5 hours at a time. Ask me how I know. So I got this one. It's amazing. I love it. it's spectacular. So that is the iron that I use. Also, the traveling case for it, which allows you to hang it, is also a trivet so that you can just leave it set down. I mean, it's just very well done. I love it. It's my preferred iron to take. And so I do take this everywhere. And it's tiny. It's super tiny, which is wonderful. Heading back to that OmniGrid cutting mat I showed you, if I'm going to a sew-in, I take it. This side is a pressing mat, and it's got that wonderful reflective material on top. So it really does give you a great pressing surface. So half of it is a cutting mat, half of it is a pressing surface, and this is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing to take with you to your sew-in days. Okay, so now I'm getting to be a little bit extra, but like that's who I am. I love to like do things the comfortable right way. And so if I'm going to a retreat, and feel free to laugh at me, and those of you who have been a member of either the Modern Quilting Academy or Learn to Quilt in 60 Days, you already know what I'm about to pull out because I have you guys make them in that course. But this is a TV tray. Moving sticker. Military family. How to show me your military family without saying you're a military family. Moving stickers on everything. It is, and see, this is gross. You see how like burnt it is? I really should put a new cover on it, which is super easy because with this size, you can just use a fat quarter. Awesome. But this is what I take with me for my pressing surface. So I actually just take this, I set it up right next to my sewing machine, put my iron on it, and I am good to go. And if I'm being 100% honest, which is what I do here, I also do this at home. So that, again, because I sit in front of my sewing machine for hours at a time, I don't need to keep on getting up and sitting down. I just turn, press, back to my sewing machine, which is pretty great. I actually, and I'm really excited about this, my husband found me, and this was like the weirdest thing ever, and I was like, oh my God, you are amazing. This is why I married you. My husband found me one of those trays from a hospital. You know when you're like sitting in a hospital bed and they have that big tray that can slide, it's on wheels, it slides over, it's an adjustable height, it's what you eat your food off of. Somebody was selling one on Craigslist and he got it for me. It's gigantic. It's like 3 times the size of my tray my TV tray that I use. And I'm going to refinish that thing, wrap it in the batting, cover it with fabric, and that's going to be my new side-by-side ironing station because, and that's just really for home use. I wouldn't bring that because it just doesn't fold down flat, so I wouldn't bring it to a retreat. I'm just, word vomiting at you guys at this point. But this table here, which is my sewing table, trusty old chorus here on the table with me, is actually a 32 inch high. Yeah, it's counter height sewing table. And I do that because it's a big table. This is like a 8-foot long table. So I can fit a 24 by 36 inch cutting mat on it. I fit my giant sewing machine on it. I've got plenty of room to work and like have piles of stuff all over the place on it. And so my TV tray is a little bit low in comparison to my table. So now this new tray from the hospital, I can adjust the height on it. So I'm very excited about that. But that's neither here nor there. Now, other things that I bring with me to a retreat. We've done the basics of pressing, cutting, and sewing, right? But there's so much more that I bring. So this is a thread catcher. And in here, I bring all of, this is where I put my half square triangle trimmings, the little dog ears that I clip off, everything. I use this every day in my sewing studio because it helps keep it clean. But I find it to be like almost a necessity at a retreat. So all retreat centers are not created equal. Some are designated retreat centers, quilting retreat centers. And they have everything figured out for you, from outlets to, cutting stations. Everything has really been thought out because it's a space that's been intentionally made for that. A lot of them, however, are, in hotel ballrooms or just at general like retreat, like not quilting retreat, but like it could be a yoga retreat. It could be, any kind of thing. And you just so happen to have a big enough space to set it up for sewing. And in those cases, they have commercial carpeting. And commercial carpeting and thread and scraps of fabric are no bueno. And I like to clean up after myself. I'm not going to leave a mess anywhere I go. You leave a place better than you found it. That's what my mama says. And so I keep this because now when I'm trimming, I can throw all of this little scrappy garbage that could potentially flutter to the floor, get stuck in that carpeting, be a pain to pick up. It goes in here instead. And this is a super, like legit, you can make one of these in about an hour. And I have a tutorial on how to make these on the YouTube channel, so I'll put a link to that as well. But this is fantastic. I love it. I use it all the time. I'm sorry that went blurry for a second. That's a little obnoxious. But yeah, so I use this all the time. It's wonderful. So that's my thread catcher. I bring one of these. And now there's like an official quilting one, so I'll put the link to that in the show notes. I don't think this is it. I think this is a generic one that I found. I think this one technically is for like makeup brushes, but it's a holder that is about, let me put this down. It's about 8 inches long, 2 inches wide, and it's got this silicone holders, like so that you could stick. I use it for my brush, for my sewing machine stylus, for my thread snips, so everything will just kind of get stuck in here and hold it. And the reason why I take this with me to any retreat or sew-in is that when you're sewing in a space that's not your usual space, it's very easy to get messy because you're putting stuff down, you're not quite sure where you put it down, you're searching around for it because it's not your usual setup. And so by having this and making sure that everything goes back into this, your stiletto, your snips, your brush, your stylus, all of those types of things, even like sewing machine feet, it keeps everything in one place. And it also, again, keeps it from getting too messy and things getting lost. So this is a really fun, it's like a stow and carry. Golly, why can't I think of the name of this? But anyway, that's a wonderful thing to bring with you. Another thing is I am a best press person. Like, I best press the crap out of everything. I know best press, you can buy it in its own spray bottle. I like the continuous spray types of spray bottles. And I think Best Press has actually started to sell these as well. But this one I got off of Amazon really inexpensively, and it was like a 2-pack. I'll link to it. But I just used my handy dandy Cricut and labeled that Best Press so that way it doesn't get mixed up, because since it did come in a 2-pack, I've got another one floating around the house with like, cleaner in it. And so we don't want to mix those guys up. But Best Press. What else do I take with me? Oh my gosh, so much. I'm like, oh, what else do I take with me? Oh, here's the giant stack of things I set aside. So another thing that I take with me is a place for everything bags. And I have multiple of them. These, I have here 2 of them. I have one, and this one is with all of my hand sewing. So this is like my English paper piecing kit. So a place for everything bag is a by Annie pattern. It's awesome. They are just amazing, amazing bags that hold like everything. I'm going to open one up for you in a moment. So I have one for hand sewing because at night sometimes, and this will really depend on the type of retreat and retreat center you're at. Ones where it's like a hotel, I don't usually use it as much. But ones that are like in like a ski lodge, what'll happen is you'll sew all day and you will sew all day. And then maybe your eyes get tired, or people start to kind of like wander off. They go sit by the fireplace, they have a glass of wine, but you still want to be accomplishing something. Hand sewing is your friend. So English paper piecing, this is my English paper piecing bag. I've been talking about a lot of notions though. I've mentioned, my fabric shears, my snips, my stiletto, my brush, all of these little things. And I have an ultimate travel, place for everything bag for that as well. And so this is the one I'm going to open because this one's a little lighter. I picked this one up and I was like, holy smokes, it's chock full. So I didn't want to open that one up and like have it explode on you. So here is the A Place for Everything bag. And the A Place for Everything bag is like a little suitcase style bag, and it has pages in it. And this one has 4 pages, so it's actually 2 pages with 2 pages each. So there's 4 overall pages, front and back, and there are slip pockets, there are so we've got zipper pockets, we've got slip pockets. I keep everything from seam rippers, pens, post-it notes, needles, rotary cutter blades, all sorts in here. This one's kind of empty right now because I haven't packed it, and I usually don't pack it until I'm going to a retreat. But all sorts of stuff in here. And it's just a wonderful compact design. It has this Velcro strap holding the pages in, so you can mix and match. So like, let's say I want to take some of the pages out of here that are all fully stocked and ones out of here that are fully stocked. I can switch them around and bring exactly what I want with me. It's a really cool pattern. Annie is amazing. She does amazing work. And her patterns are just spectacular. So I'll include the pattern to that. But this is how I carry everything. And then it's a much more easily compact, and you saw how much you can really fit a lot of stuff in here. But it's a really easy way to carry all of this stuff with you. Okay, so that's that. Now, at a big retreat center, or really like, again, I'm mentioning the same quilt retreat because it's the most recent one I've been to. But when we went to the Interlaken Inn, it was like a conference room that we were set up in. We each had it was kind of like a folding table, but a little bit better than that because it was like for a conference. We each had one to ourselves. So it was big enough that we could have our full-size cutting mats. We could have our full-size sewing machines, which I did bring my full-size sewing machine with me to that one because if I'm going to be sewing for several days in a row, I want my big sewing machine. So I had room for that. But I also bought this. And this I got at IKEA for like $4. Don't quote me on that. I'm sure inflation now makes this thing like $30. But at the time, it was super cheap. And I'm sure it's IKEA, so it's probably no more than $10 at this point. But it's actually for cookbooks and recipes. But I use it for my quilt patterns. And so I just set it up in the corner. It's out of my way. I can visually consult it. Super easy. And it's wonderful. It's super lightweight. It takes up like little to no room. It's great. If you already have one of these at home in your kitchen, you can go ahead and take that with you, or you can grab one of these. Again, links in the show notes. And just because I used it as a prop, this is the Sampler Spree book by Susan Aki. I'm running a slow along with it, and it's awesome. So if you want to partake in that, you can visit the link in the show notes. Holy cow, these show notes are going to be full of links today. Okay. So I think that's just about everything. And that was like a lot of stuff. I know it was a lot of stuff. But holy cow, you can really prepare yourself well. I will say you have to really super plan if you'll be flying to your retreat, but many of you won't be. A lot of times, what quilt guilds especially will choose a retreat that is within driving distance, usually no more than 2 or 3 hours away. And so then you can load all of this stuff in your car. If you're flying, it's kind of a different ball game, and I understand that, especially with weight requirements on suitcases. They're a bummer. But I have also flown with my sewing machine, so it can be done. And that's how I get to visit all of you wonderful people. So all of these notes, all of these links will be in the show notes or the video description, whether you're listening on your favorite podcast provider or watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for spending yet another afternoon with me at the Stop Scrolling, Stop Sewing podcast. Did I just say stop scrolling, stop sewing? Stop scrolling, start sewing podcast. I cannot wait to see what you are up to, and I will see you same time next week. Bye for now.